This is Russell Pierce. Russell Pierce is a Republican and a Tea Party favorite. He's president of the state Senate in the great state of Arizona. Russell Pierce made a national name for himself last year by pushing through Arizona's Papers, Please law. Remember SB 1070? At the time, the most draconian anti-immigration law in the country before Alabama got a hold of the issue. A federal judge has blocked Arizona from enforcing major parts of Papers, Please. But in the meantime, Arizona voters, angry or grossed out by the whole SB 1070 ordeal, started a recall campaign against Russell Pierce. The recall campaign says Pierce has demonstrated, quote, overt disdain for the United States Constitution. They put this petition out there and they put Russell Pierce up for a vote. Now, through no fault of the Arizona recallers, they are now watching a cautionary tale unfold about the way we make decisions these days in our little democracy. Here's how it goes. Ready? The candidate who's trying to unseat Russell Pierce is, in fact, a fellow Republican. It's this guy here. He is a totally mainstream local Republican from the district who was urged into the race by other local Republicans who were embarrassed by Russell Pierce. He says he accepted the challenge after a period of prayer and fasting. His biggest asset in the race is, of course, that he is not Russell Pierce. Russell Pierce seems to have decided that he maybe couldn't win that way if it was just him against this other regular guy, mainstream Republican from the district. So it appears that Russell Pierce and or his supporters have concocted a scheme to run a fake candidate to confuse voters, to shear off votes from the mainstream Republican running against Mr. Pierce. The idea is to bamboozle voters into splitting the anti-Russell Pierce vote between two candidates so Russell Pierce ends up holding on to his seat. The head of the local Tea Party group, which supports Russell Pierce, became the campaign manager. Not for Russell Pierce, not for his opponent, obviously, but for this third candidate who they found. She is a local woman with no political history or experience at all. She is a naturalized citizen from Mexico. Russell Pierce's brother, his name is Lester, is a justice of the peace locally. He's therefore not supposed to get involved with any campaigning at all. But Brother Lester went out campaigning anyway with his daughters, with Russell Pierce's nieces, to collect signatures. They were not campaigning for Russell Pierce. They were campaigning for this third candidate they found, Olivia Cortez, to get her on the ballot. In addition to that remarkably charitable effort by the Russell Pierce family, the mysterious Cortez campaign also somehow found itself with enough money, enough funding to pay professional signature gatherers to go out alongside Russell Pierce's nieces in order to get Olivia Cortez on the ballot.
I was told that if people were supporters of Mr. Pierce, to tell them, go ahead and sign this, that this will help his chances.
So the idea was to dilute or divert the vote?
Yeah. By
running a diversionary or a sham candidate that might run afoul of Arizona's election laws?
I had no idea.
I had no idea, she says, no idea that there could be serious legal consequences in this scheme to save Russell Pierce from being recalled by saving Russell Pierce from running a clear election against somebody who wants to recall him. The circumstances of the Russell Pierce recall race were strange enough that a Maricopa County judge began holding hearings into whether or not this Olivia Cortez had been put up for a sham candidacy, whether this was in fact just a Tea Party Republican pro-Russell Pierce dirty trick in this Arizona election. On Thursday, facing the possibility that Senator Pierce's family would be compelled to testify in this case, Olivia Cortez suddenly dropped out of the race. She dropped out. But you know what? As far as dirty tricks go, mission accomplished. Because when voters in that Russell Pierce district go to the polls on November 8th, the name Olivia Cortez will still be on that ballot. The ballots are already printed. Her name will be right there alongside the name of the mainstream Republican who really is running and alongside the name Russell Pierce. So 3 names in what is now a 2-person race. 2 people who aren't Russell Pierce conveniently splitting the vote against him. So that's what it looks like in Arizona now, which is frankly a nice reminder, both that people are fighting back against some of the extremes of the last couple of years in state politics, but also a good reminder of how Republicans roll these days. what partisan politics looks like right now around elections this year and next. Consider also Ohio, where Republicans jammed a union stripping bill through the legislature in March. Why attack union rights? Well, for all attacking unions does to undermine the middle class directly and lower everyone's wages and living standards directly, attacking unions also has the nice partisan side effect of attacking the Democratic Party's largest institutional base of support. Ohio's blog of mass destruction recently posted this email from a local Ohio Tea Party leader, quote, "Let me be clear. For the Tea Party Patriot movement, our number one goal is to defund the union leadership and thus their exclusive partners in the Democratic Party and take back control of our government. If SB 5 is upheld," the email continues, "Democrats will not have the money to compete in Ohio next year. Barack Obama and Sherrod Brown will lose Ohio and be thrown out of office in 2012. Our number one goal is to defund the union leadership and thus the Democratic Party, defeat Obama, defeat Sherrod Brown." The intent is not to level the playing field, in other words, but to tilt it permanently, to make it so conservative causes win and progressive ones lose, not just this year, not just next year, but for years after that, to use public policy to give Republicans an advantage in elections. Here's the thing, though. Ohio has been fighting back against this. In June, Ohioans delivered enough signatures several times over to force a recall of Ohio's union stripping bill. The bill is not in effect because the recall effort is underway. It will be on the ballot for recall, just like Russell Pierce in Arizona. It'll be on the ballot for recall on November 8th of this year. And speaking of permanent playing field tilting, Ohio Republicans also went after early voting this year, joining a majority of other Republican legislatures this year who have voted to make it harder in one way or another to vote. Early voting, of course, was used disproportionately in 2008 by African Americans who quite disproportionately voted for Barack Obama and other Democrats. So magically, naturally, early voting has to go away before we get to the next election in 2012. And in June, Ohio Republicans did pass a law that shrinks Ohio's early voting calendar by more than half. Last month, Ohioans again fought back, delivering more than enough signatures to put that voting crimping law on hold, to put it up for repeal next year in 2012. Ohio has been fighting back all year against Republican attempts to tilt the playing field. Also in Maine, Republicans passed a law to end that state's tradition of being able to register on the same day that you vote. That has been the law in Maine for decades, but Republicans undid it this year. Maine fought back, though, and got enough signatures to force a citizen's repeal of that law on this November's ballot. In Tennessee, where you may remember our story about 96-year-old Dorothy Cooper suddenly finding it hard to vote after Republicans in Tennessee passed a bill that says you can't vote unless you show an ID that hundreds of thousands of Tennesseans don't have. In Tennessee, the story of Dorothy Cooper is not just an infuriating story anymore. Now it is a rallying cry, the state Democratic Party trying to rally voters against how much harder Tennessee Republicans have just made it to vote there. And Tennesseans launching a new effort, like Ohio, like Maine, like Arizona, to get this thing onto the ballot for a citizen's recall. People are fighting back. These are state-by-state laws, but of course the cumulative effect is national and pretty obviously intentional, to structurally tilt the playing field so state laws about elections make it harder for likely Democrats to vote, and therefore more likely for Republican candidates to win in the next election and in every election after. As such, the Democrats' Senate Campaign Committee nationally have just announced that at the national level, the DSCC will be fighting back. They're asking for help from the Justice Department in protecting voting rights state by state. They also say they'll be making a renewed push to register voters and to mount get-out-the-vote efforts in the states that have been targeted by Republicans changing the laws. And maybe that could help. Maybe it will. I think the attention to this issue certainly helps, if only because it makes people who these laws are designed to discourage from voting. It makes those folks know that somebody is trying to keep them from the voting booth, which can have a motivating effect on the need to vote on Election Day. But this kind of coordinated, sustained national assault on voting isn't an esoteric thing. It isn't an idea. It isn't a plan. It is happening. It is concrete and nuts and bolts and hard to counteract. Fighting for these kinds of rights, fighting back, is about how we decide things in America. It is at the level of sinew and bone. This is a structural thing. This is deep and national. And sometimes it comes down to decisions that are very, very, very individual and very local. We've been bringing you the story of two county clerks in Colorado, where the new Republican Secretary of State has ordered the counties not to send ballots to voters who would usually expect to get them. In Denver, the voters happen to live in heavily Hispanic neighborhoods. Anybody who hadn't voted since the big election in 2010 or re-upped their registration, no ballot for you. In Pueblo County, the voters happen to be also U.S. troops overseas who would usually get sent a ballot, but who the Republican Secretary of State in Colorado said he wanted left out of the ballot mailings this year. On Friday, a judge ruled against the Republican Secretary of State in Colorado in a hearing on the Denver case. He ruled that Denver's ballots could get mailed out to those disproportionately Hispanic voters. And as we reported exclusively on Friday night, in Pueblo County, the clerk there heard that verdict. He was in the courtroom. He heard the judge's verdict. And without waiting for more details, he got on the phone to his office and told them to send out those ballots to those troops. Send out the military ballots. This is what fighting back sometimes looks like. Right? It is a national fight. There's obviously a national plan at work here. But sometimes stopping this stuff, sometimes standing up to this stuff, comes down to one person, one official, doing what he or she believes is the right thing to do, and doing it right away. Joining us now is Gilbert Ortiz. He's the Pueblo County clerk and recorder who earlier this month was ordered by Colorado Secretary of State not to send ballots to military personnel overseas. He joins us live from Colorado. Mr. Ortiz, thank you for making time to join us tonight.
Thank you.
Last week, moments after the court ruling, I know our office spoke with you and we learned that you had sent those ballots out to troops overseas. Was that a hard decision for you to make? Did you know you would do that when that verdict came down that night?
I knew exactly I would do that. It was my intention since the beginning of this whole process to send those ballots out to military overseas voters. And so it was an exciting moment for me and my staff, and I made that call as soon as I was able to.
We have been looking at this issue of voting rights in terms of its effect on electoral politics, literally on elections. In your role as county clerk, how do you see this? Do you feel like this is unfolding in a partisan manner? Is this a technocratic issue to you? How do you see these changes that have been the Secretary of State has been trying to put in place in Colorado this year?
You know, in Pueblo County, I really concentrate on our own voters, and it's always been my intent as a election official to send ballots out to everybody that's registered and to make the voting process available to them. And it's something that I'm passionate about, and I think all clerks in Colorado are passionate about. And you know, we're not paying attention so much to the political side or the reasons behind it. We just know that we want to send ballots to registered voters in Colorado counties.
Mr. Ortiz, have you, in your capacity as clerk and recorder in Pueblo County, have you ever had to deal with a problem of voter fraud, of voter impersonation fraud, or any other kind of voter fraud by troops serving overseas?
It's never happened. I can't imagine that it would happen. Here our troops are overseas, and they deserve a ballot. They're out there defending democracy for all of us, and the least we can do as election officials is to send them a ballot and make them part of the process.
In terms of, I hear what you say, sir, about not focusing on the politics of this. Your job is to run the elections, not to make sure they go any particular way. But I wonder, since you've been involved in this, what's turning out to be a real fight in Colorado, a real difference of opinion here and being fought out in court and other places, do you feel like you have the support of the people who you serve, the support of Pueblo County in your stand to try to get ballots out to the people of the county in as, I guess, a quick and seamless a way as possible?
I do. You know, we made intergovernmental agreements with all our participating entities early on in the process. They all agreed in the contract to send ballots out to inactive fail-to-vote voters. You know, just walking around Pueblo County recently and in the grocery store with my family, I've gotten a lot of support, a lot of pats on the back for what we're doing. And I've gotten a lot of phone calls nationally from veterans groups and from veterans themselves thanking me for continuing to fight for their right to vote. So it's been great. It's been very difficult to deal with this every day. I'm used to dealing with just ballots and elections, and the political spotlight's a little difficult, but I'm excited for what we've done and the fight that we've brought.
Gilbert Ortiz, Pueblo County, Colorado clerk and recorder. Thank you for your time tonight, sir. I know that this fight is not over in Pueblo County and in Colorado at large. We'd love to stay in touch with you as this all progresses.
I'd love that, Rachel. Thank you.
Thanks very much. All right. Melissa Harris Perry joins us next. Please stay with us.